Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for participating in CouchCon. This is our wonderful Sanity Checks and Stigma panel. And I've got wonderful people here to talk with us for the hour. And we will be taking questions from you in chat. So, as our wonderful guests here are talking, if you have an idea, something's not clear, or you would like to just ask a question, make sure you put it in chat. We will try to answer those as we can. Who am I? My name is Lynn Meyer, and I write stuff, and I stream stuff, and I edit stuff, and I hang out with some of these wonderful folks too. So I can tell you all about that if you want, but I'm not the important person here. They are. So we've got Jess Markram, we've got Scriv the Bard, we've got Quinn Rodriguez, we've got Noah Stevens, and we've got Chantel Benjamin here. And I'm going to ask all of them to give us a quick recap of who they are, what they do, and why they are so awesome. Okay, let's see. I think we'll start with Chantel.
Hi, I'm Chantel. I am a streamer of um, TTRPGs. I write also prose and TTRPG adventures at this point. I'm a psychologist and I'm an actor, which doesn't make this any less nerve wracking, oddly. But, there it is.
And Noah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Noah Stevens. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Maryland. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and those things since about 1980, I think, 1980. And I'm a blogger and I've written a couple things, mostly free stuff. There you go.
Excellent. Thank you. Quinn.
Hello, I'm Quinn B. Rodriguez. You probably know me across the internet as Quintastic. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a TTRPG creator, an actual player, variety streamer. I live on the internet and I'm a nerd. I don't know. I write very strange games called Fever Dreams. It's a whole thing.
Excellent. Scriv.
Oh, geez. Hello, my name is Scriv the Bard. My grown up day job, if you can call it that, is as a cultural psychologist. And every other hour of the day, I am a writer, a game designer, and GM for family friendly tabletop RPGs. I write a bunch of articles in a couple of different places.
Excellent. And Jess.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Markram. You might see me down in the chat as Angry Nerd Girl. And I'm a licensed social worker in Pennsylvania. And I write games and supplements and adventures. Oh, and I stream too. I do that a lot.
Yes. And I'm really hoping we hear from Henry. Henry is a very loud cat that Jess has, who sometimes makes himself known on streams. So if we're lucky, we may get a Henry uh, audio sighting or otherwise. So let's hope. So again, thank you so much for being here, everybody. As a reminder, all of this we're doing to support, Doctors Without Borders. So there's link down below. There's info. Please make sure to support them. I myself am a chronically ill, high risk person, and I want to just really say thank you to everybody who's social distancing, who's keeping themselves safe and helping to keep others safe, and really want to support all of the folks who are out there every day keeping us going during this time of self quarantine and self isolation, which we know is really hard for a lot of people. Even if you normally are an introvert, this is a mandated introversion, and that can be a big shift for a lot of folks. So, just as a little icebreaker, just so we could get to know each other a little bit, I'm going to ask you, what is the weirdest thing that you have done now during social isolation? And anybody who wants to jump in, you can take that.
I'll go.
Yeah.
I have done a silly thing, and I've been trying to learn how to write sonnets. And
Nice.
they're
That's
very
amazing.
difficult, and Shakespeare wrote a lot of them, and I am not that man. Because there was that thing going around for a while of like, oh, Shakespeare wrote King Lear in quarantine, and I'm like, well, okay, maybe I can write a sonnet. Pentameter's hard, y'all.
No pressure, no pressure. Be like Shakespeare. It's awesome though. Who else? What weird thing have you done? Or interesting or fun?
I've been the weirdest thing I think for me has been that I actually have a routine now. that is that's weird because I'm used to floating through freelance life, and at the moment I'm pretty stable with the wake ups and the go to beds at this time to get things done.
Mm, yeah, that would be strange for me. I feel that.
I
Jess.
can.
Or
Uh,
Scriv.
Scriv, go ahead.
After you, Jess.
Okay.
Everybody's so nice.
The first week I was off, I basically turned into a vampire and I was waking up at 5 p.m. and going to bed at 5 a.m. But now I'm back to work and I can't do that. And so probably the weirdest or dumbest thing was I got jealous of everybody making bread and I didn't understand that a sourdough starter was not something you buy at the store. So when I sent my partner to the store, I asked him to buy a sourdough starter so that I could make bread. And he was like, that's not a thing.
Oh, Scriv. What were you gonna say?
I was just going to echo the whole actually having a sleep schedule
Mm.
now. I'm getting more sleep than I think I ever have, and I'm not quite sure what to do with all this extra energy. Um, Definitely done the PJs all day thing. Definitely had delivery more than we probably should, but gotta support those businesses staying open and keeping us all going. The gym I go to is closed down, so they've actually been doing some training sessions over Zoom, and I've started trying to do that outside because we have a rare period of time here in England where it's sunny and beautiful. So you go outside when you can, right? But without the usual equipment, let's say we've had to get creative with the use of furniture in the garden, and I think some of my neighbors were concerned.
Love it. What about Noah? Anything unusual?
The strangest thing that I've done this week is my wife and daughter and I moved to a deserted island run by a capitalist raccoon who's, I mean, if you got to have a landlord these days, a little animated raccoon guy is not so bad. He doesn't call you when you don't make payments like some other landlords I've had. So
Nice.
the most dangerous thing there is a tarantula. It's not that bad, actually.
Tarantula.
Could be
I'm trying to get better. I'm
worse.
trying to get better on those. But I will say I don't know if I have anything weird, but I've been cooking a lot, just as an FYI. So I have a strangely um, creative streak when it comes to that. I'm letting out my inner Martha Stewart. So anybody ever wants to swap recipes, let me know, and I will love you. So so we do have some questions already. I don't know if we've got questions in the chat yet, but I will try to sprinkle those in as we go. But for our mental health professionals here, so I'm specifically thinking of Jessica, Noah, and Chantal. How does your work as a mental health practitioner overlap with your work as a game designer? And does one help inform the other? Who wants to who wants to go? Let's see. I'll start with
I'll,
Chantel.
yeah, I'll jump in. Um, there are almost the entire field of psychology I feel like is sort of geared toward the idea of rewriting your story, and there are whole styles of therapy that are literally, I mean, narrative therapy exists purely because to be something that rewrites your story, or rewrites the story so that you are more comfortable with how that it worked and the way that you frame it. That is something that I've taken that just sort of jumps back and forth for me, because as a writer I'm kind of going, okay, I'll give you this stimulus. what are you going to do with it? And what do you want to do with it? And then if that doesn't work, what else could you do with it? And I find that quite fascinating, that overlap that happens there.
Excellent. Do I see other folks with their
I can go.
hands up? Yeah.
Um, in terms of bringing like my mental health work into my game writing, I primarily do trauma work. My background's in sexual assault, and I've been writing a lot of games that I've basically been either pitching to or hired on to do that are based on fairy tales or have aspects of mythology in them. And a lot of those are really squicky and touch on darker topics. And because of my day job, I've been trying to integrate how to handle them in a sensitive and realistic way. I also do sensitivity readings for that kind of topics, but bringing the gaming into my daytime work. Sometimes with clients who are what we would call like a critical care client or somebody who is very high needs, when we can only do really short sessions with them or they have a hard time communicating, the only way to do it is with a game. Like I played Jenga with some clients and just write like emotions on each Jenga piece. So when they pull a piece out, then they have to say like a time they felt that emotion or answer a question. Other clients who have difficulty not being in control, I've actually introduced them to GMing because you sort of get the idea that you're in control, but you're not actually in control at all. And it can be a great way for them to kind of experience organized chaos in a safe way.
I had to unmute myself there. That's really interesting. I've not been brave enough to be a game master myself, so respect to all the game masters out there. Seriously, you amaze me. Um, and we've got one more person. You want to chime in as a mental health professional?
Sure, yeah, sure. I think maybe the best thing about playing Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games, practically my whole life, is because it allows me to imagine different things than what I'm normally used to, right? And help people get in that headspace where things could be different and different possibilities are there. Um, yeah, therapy and trying things and being brave and doing things in a different way takes a little bit of imaginative uh, uh, impulse and some bravery and a little bit of hope, and all those things are things I've been getting in my dungeons since I was 7 years old or something. So yeah, it's nice.
Well, that makes a really great segue then to talk to our other panelists here about your experiences as role players. How has role playing and being part of role playing games impacted your recovery? And are there certain aspects that are most helpful to you? Did your recovery change the kind of role playing you did, the characters you would choose? I can speak for myself, certainly. So I know I feel this question a lot, but I'd love to hear from you. Scriff, you're muted.
Okay,
There you
okay.
are.
Well, I was saying Quinn after you.
Oh,
Um,
I have to get better at
that's
deciphering.
okay. That's okay. I muted myself, so that's my own problem. So for me, the biggest impact in terms of my own sense of personal growth and healing through difficult times has actually been in not just being a player, but in creating and teaching RPGs.
Mm.
So my mother passed away just over 2 years ago, and she passed to me her love of stories when I was very young. I would read bedtime stories to my sisters when we grew up. If we didn't have new books to read, we would just make them up together. She inspired that sense of writing. So, as part of that coping and growth process for me, um, I had already been playing RPGs for some time, but something within me kind of switched on, and I started using tabletop RPGs, predominantly Dungeons and Dragons, as a way to highlight her legacy of storytelling. I started through kids' workshops, taught them how to tell stories, their own stories through D&D, finding their own sense of confidence and creativity, the way that storytelling did for me throughout my life. And that just evolved into ongoing campaigns and then writing. But the focus has always been on bringing people together, bringing these stories to children, helping them find their own tales, and um, and their families as well. Their parents will join in on the games too. And it's just been incredibly fulfilling to be a part of that kind of community. And it's been a sort of family for me in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. Quinn.
I kind of similarly, like, I get that. One of the biggest things that getting into tabletop has done for me is give me like a sense of community that I didn't really have before. Especially because I do it now live on Twitch a lot. So I see a lot of the same faces and new faces, and I'm doing it more regularly, and it's very exciting. Whereas beforehand, it was I socializing hard. How do words make good? But I think one of the biggest things, also, I am bipolar. I live with PTSD, OCD, several other letters of the alphabet in various orders. One of the biggest things that TTRPGs, playing them regularly, has done for me has given me like something to look forward to during the week. Like, if I'm having a really low spoons day on Wednesday, I can go, oh well, at least I have a session tonight. Like, at least I'm gonna see these people. At least I can get through this because I get to the reward of seeing my friends and doing the ridiculous antics, whatever we're doing in that session. Um, but also, like, the more I've sort of started to dive deeper, I guess, into my recovery and healing, especially with like the bipolar disorder stuff, is I started writing less conventional TTRPGs, and I call them fever dreams. They're from the sword dream movement. I won't go on a tangent about that, I promise. And stop me if I do. But they're smaller games meant to evoke an emotional response, inspire introspection, and like seek catharsis. Catharsis is super important to me, I think, as a writer, as a person who consumes media, and as a role player. Like, you want to see the conclusion of an arc, right? Sorry, I'm super rambly about this. I have a lot of feelings and opinions.
That's okay. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to do this topic, is because it's important for certainly everybody here. And I know a lot of folks who are watching. So don't apologize. We got you. Um, and I think just this brings up a really interesting point about community and finding people who understand and finding people that you can be with. One of the reasons that we called this what we did is the idea of stigma, and whether however that impacts us or has impacted us. So this is just a question for anybody who wants to answer it. Can you tell us about how, well, this interaction between sanity checks and stigma? How does stigma affect gameplay, and how can we design or run our games without it? That's a really important question that I know a lot of us wrestle with. So if you have any advice or insight, we would love it.
I can take that one because it's like a bug in my craw kind of thing. Uh, it's something that I get asked to sensitivity read all the time for, is people are like, how can I make sanity checks in my game or a sanity mechanism okay? And I'm like, well, you can't. Uh, or how do I depict madness mechanically? Or like, this villain or how can I give a player a mental health problem? And I'm like, please don't do that. Uh, yeah. So it's one thing to have like an NPC or even a villain who has exhibits symptoms of uh mental illness. Like in Friends, Foes, and Other Fine Folks, we wrote a whole bunch of NPCs that you can use in your game. When we had them right over, some of them have like general anxiety disorder, some of them hear voices, and but they're not like bad people. It's not like this is a bad person because he's mad, or hey, you saw this horrible thing and now you're traumatized, and now this is like, I don't want to call out Cthulhu, but I'm going to call out Cthulhu. It's I don't care that an eldritch being is driving you like madness. It's a gross mechanic, and it makes people who have actual mental health um background trauma like me and my clients kind of look at that and say that's not a safe place for me. So yeah, right. Sorry, I went off on a thing. If you want to include mental health in your game, you can use like symptoms of mental health in your game. You can even have villains with mental health problems in your game. Please don't make them the only people with mental health issues in your game, because that gets into a whole other thing. But you can do it safely. And also, if you don't have the background, hire a sensitivity reader. We're not that expensive. Uh, but yeah, just don't make it the reason they're bad. Just like you wouldn't say like this woman is adventuring because she was assaulted, because that's the only reason women do anything, right? Like just don't do it. That's my too long answer.
Jess, you've got chat cheering you on and saying yes, call out where it's appropriate. Absolutely do it. So no apologies for that. Anybody else want to take
That's
that question?
I'll let the mental health professionals go first. I had a thing I wanted to say from kind of a cultural psychology standpoint as well, just very briefly.
Sure.
So I absolutely agree. I think the ability to reach out to sensitivity readers and just try to gain some of that understanding is so very important if you, as a creator or a GM, want to explore some of those themes. As long as you do it in a healthy and respectful manner, that really, I agree with you, Jess. That's more the key. Um, and a lot of the stigmas, you see this a lot in cultural psychology when it comes to different biases and different um, often misguided perceptions that aren't intended to harm or hurt necessarily, but they're things that we've adopted, stigmas and biases over time that are largely unknown to us. And it takes a significant amount of self reflection to really understand them. And that can be hard to do. And you have to do a lot of, putting away your pride in order to do that in certain ways. I think that identification process really comes from exposing yourself to those different viewpoints and perspectives, whether that's talking to a sensitivity reader, whether that's engaging with different people who have gone through these different experiences so you can kind of internalize some of that yourself. If you continuously surround yourself with only like-minded people, you get this sense of affirmation. And we're all guilty of it because that's something that makes us feel good, right? But whichever stigmas we have will just continue to be supported in that sense. So I think that would go a long way in reducing those unintentional inclusions or perversions of these different elements and biases in our games.
Right. I see a lot of head nodding. Anybody want to add to that or?
What I'd like to add is from my work as a psychologist, I have never met anyone ever in my capacity as a psychologist with one mental illness. Everyone is a cluster of symptoms. And I'm not even talking about everyone that comes into my office. Every human being is a cluster of symptoms. We all experience things in so many different ways. And maybe you could put a name to it, but that name's not going to be accurate. The name is never going to be accurate. The letters that we give, the names that we give, the words that we use help because they help us and guide us in what is most likely to be helpful for recovery, but they are not us. And so in terms of the stigma that can come out so much, I mean, it gets frustrating because I see it happen, and it's wrong from a psychological perspective and it's wrong from a human perspective. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to add on to that? Yes, Quinn.
Yeah. I mean, as like, I am not a mental health professional. I cannot make that clear. But how do you even build a sanity table without ingrained stigma? Because the existence of a sanity table is implying
Right.
you're deigning a behavior as abnormal or incorrect based on what? Based on what you're told is normal, what you've established is sane. I hate that word so much. So there are better ways to deter, like if you want to do like Out of the Abyss comes to mind, and here's looking at you, Pandemonium. But like there are better ways to determine or indicate stress, and like the wear that lack of sleep or the winds of pandemonium have on like your mind and your body. Stress affects everyone differently, and I think it should be like a role play based thing. Stands off soapbox briefly.
Noah, did you want to say something? I do have a question or a follow-up question from chat too, by the way. So, yes.
I'm happy to. I would say that you know, things like Call of Cthulhu, a lot of people don't comprehend, because the only real training they might have had in mental health issues might be the, you know, the mental illness section of Call of Cthulhu, right? And you know, it's it's very informative from like a 1930s perspective. And I think you know, there are a lot of good role play opportunities to be had in Call of Cthulhu, provided that everybody is there for the same game, and you know, trust each other. And you know, as a game master, a judge, or dungeon master, whatever you want to call it, I, you know, I have a hard time these days after watching people have the world imposed on them. I can't impose conditions on players anymore, like, you know, poisoned or disease, or God forbid, mental health issues. If somebody wants to undertake those things as role playing opportunities, you know, they should know the group pretty well, and standards ought to be established at the front of the game, because you never know whose you know, feet you might be treading on, and whose friendships you might be straining pretty hard. Um, I would say if you're going to do those, it's not for a casual, you know, pickup game of D&D at a con, for example, or those kind of things. That's my professional and hobby opinion. You know, I won't write off Call of Cthulhu. I'm actually, you may not be able to see it, but if I turn around, here's the D20 Call of Cthulhu right here. Great book, a beautiful work of art, but antiquated even as earnest as it is, right? So.
Well, you know, bringing up this topic of safety at the table and not knowing even what our really good friends might be going through or have as lines and veils. We have a question from the chat where I may be pronouncing this wrong, but it looks like Mything Reality asks, people tend to think that safety tools are for cons, pickup games, or groups that don't know each other. What advice do you have for introducing safety tools to long-standing groups that have known each other for years, and so have some members who are resistant to safety tools because we already trust each other? I see Quinn with a very knowing smile and a nod. You want to take that to start?
I love safety tools a whole lot. They live on my desk. And as a GM, they are a lifesaver. Trying to implement them with people who've been playing for a really long time together can be very, very difficult. especially if it's like, oh no, but we know each other, it's fine. I have been in those situations. I might let one of the professionals field this a little bit more, but because I have left games because people are like, oh, we don't need lines and veils. And I'm like, we absolutely need lines and veils because you just violated several of mine. Sorry, brain fog. Hello. That thought just popped. But
That's something I live with, so I completely understand the brain fog.
yeah, safety tools are good. I think I just got excited.
Well, it's an important topic, and it's one that a lot of people have been talking about, rightly so. Anybody else want to address
I
this?
can hop in.
Yeah.
So for one, I mean, I think it's never too late to introduce safety tools to your game. Like I've called X card at a game in my house with a GM who had no idea what an X card was. And then I had to explain it. But another safety tool that I've seen that isn't being talked about as much, or at least I haven't seen it being talked about as much, is basically just connecting with another player and asking them to sort of be like your buddy and to reach out to them and say like, hey, can you speak up for me if this thing happens, kind of thing, because then you don't have to um impose on a friend or something and feel like you're calling the X card. And with close friends, they might know to do that anyway. Like I know some of my friends at the table know there are a couple topics that if they just see me freeze or shut down, they'll be like, hey, can we not have this happen? So that might be happening anyway, but that's a nice way to do it.
Excellent. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah. For me, safety tools aren't just something that you sort of bring in and say, hey, let's look at all of these physical things that are here. To me, safety tools include constant and very consistent communication with the group. So, after a game, thoughts, questions, queries, comments, just discussing what happened in the game, before the game, checking in, how's everyone going today? How are you all feeling? Just in general, because sometimes something that might not be a veil for you that particular day or that particular session, you might feel a little bit sensitive. So having those conversations about, oh, actually, I'm really tired. Okay, so maybe we won't, you know, do this particular room of the dungeon today because this is going to be intense. Or, just having those conversations as well as lines, veils, X cards, O cards, like all of those are really important. One way in might just be asking the questions of, hey, what's everyone comfortable with? Like just start the conversation there and then move it further on as it goes.
Great. We have more questions from chat. Kestrel Ray asks, do you have suggestions on how to explore in-game in a healthy way the psychological aspect of meeting eldritch horrors or even just fighting goblins and dragons, also wanting to be respectful of player agency and not take that away either? Yeah, it's a challenge sometimes. Thoughts?
Quinn looked excited.
Yes, I was thinking that.
I get excited about everything, but also because spoilers, if anyone from my Verdant Silence campaign is watching, close your ears. Because big bads are a thing that I'm not going to talk about, but Orcus is involved. I I think the most important thing you've kind of almost answered your own question there is the most important thing I think is not taking away a player's agency with a sanity roll or something. Or like making them touch the thing, therefore this happened and it's a punishing thing and it's not fun anymore, you know? So I mean I'm a super heavy RP style GM and player, so I think just doing it from there is probably the best. But if you're even thinking about your player's agency, you're on the right track.
Anybody
Yeah, I've
want
had
to
a
build on that?
GM who it's actually in a Cthulhu game after I just kind of trashed it. But how he does it basically is he's said, like, you've seen this horrible thing. How does your character react to seeing that horrible thing?
Mm.
And we get to pick, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, we have another question. Actually, we have two great questions here, so I'll start with them in order. Let's see. Uh, Again, I apologize if I mispronounce this. I'm having my own kind of a brain fog day. I think it's Sidwy or Sidwy, Sydwye. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Asks, I have players that think it is fun to play a character with an intellectual disability. I'm a psychologist. I do not allow it at my table and describe to them about some of the struggles my clients have and how I don't want the struggles to be made fun of, which I find it is often made fun of. Any suggestions on how to get this through to people?
It sounds as though what you have is a line to enforce in terms of boundaries. Um, there's a lot of uh, there's there's a lot in that. But the main thing is that that is a line, and that's a line that you as a player or GM, I don't know which you are, but that's a line that you can say, I'm not willing to cross this, I'm not willing to touch this, we're not going to do this. And as a group, you it really comes down to how much is the group willing to uh respect that line. um yeah, that's a big one.
Mhm.
I had a player once who insisted on playing every monk with a horrific Eastern Asian stereotypical accent. And we had to have a talk of, this has to stop, or you cannot play in my games. And not just this game, but any game.
Mhm.
And because talking about how racism is bad wasn't getting through. So it, yeah, like Chantel said, it was a line of like, not just for now, but forever, it stops.
Yeah.
You have to have a lot of bravery to do that too. You need to never be afraid to actually stand up for those lines, whether for yourself or for someone who maybe doesn't quite hasn't quite been able to tap into that courage themselves. If as long as you understand, you know what the lines are for those other people too, but you're not doing anyone any favors by allowing that to go on, because hopefully, best case scenario, there's no line crossed. Second best case scenario, if a line is crossed, they don't fully realize the damage that they're doing. And that goes back into those kind of inherent biases and stigmas that we talked about before. So absolutely talk about that and stand up for it and try to correct it in as respectful a way as you can.
Mhm.
But firm. Still be firm.
So great, great answers. Let's just say I'm feeling that from an experience I had recently in a home game. So I appreciate all the comments personally. Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll go.
Yeah.
We talk about not imposing, status and ailments on people, but the flip side of the thing is that having the leeway and the fantastical opportunity to explore some of these, if I guess maybe one of the best emotionally rewarding experiences I had in role playing wasn't at a quote unquote Western tabletop RPG. It was actually in a Norwegian LARP. And what I would say about that is that built into those kind of experiences are opportunities to learn and grow through taking on a new headspace. Right. I think it would be great on paper if the kinds of experiences that we're describing here, mental health experiences and mental health head frames, if undertaking those roles in a game provided people an opportunity to reduce stigma, so to speak, right? I think that's probably going to be relatively rare in, for example, a Call of Cthulhu game because, um, you know, intrinsic in those experiences is damage and doom and horrors and those kind of things. The flip side is if you can experience those kind of things in a safe, fantastic experience and grow from it and have more compassion for people with mental health issues, like many of us do, then that's maybe that's not such a bad experience. But I would still fall back on getting consent from your play group, right? If people aren't comfortable with those kind of experiences, anybody who is gonna bull in a China shop, those kind of things. You probably had to have a discussion and maybe see it to the door or something, right? Yeah, bleed, right? That's what we call that in other traditions, right? I'm
Well, that brings me to I guess we'll call it a follow-up question to that, which is, do any of you, whether as a player, DM, mental health professional, have any advice on how to tackle tricky subjects like mental health, substance abuse, and trauma at the table so that the session is healing instead of harmful? This is a big
Um,
ask, so
I
yeah,
think,
so
that's
so
a
I
hard
was
one.
I was I
it's
was
a big
I
one.
was muted. My husband walked by. I muted my mic and I forgot to unmute it. So sorry, brain
I
fog day.
think that I and I would love to hear someone else's opinions on this, but I guess just to get it started, I see this in a similar way to treating other difficult topics. You can run into a lot of very difficult and inhumane topics in tabletop RPGs, both in terms of psychological and mental illness. And think about how many cults to human sacrifice out there. You know, those aren't cool things either. Um, but I think that, again, as long as you approach it in a sensitive way, I think it depends on how you handle it after it's been introduced. If you present a character, whether as a player or as a GM, who's going through something like one of these tricky subjects, but you don't have an avenue for growth and you don't have an avenue to then explore the coping mechanisms, or when it comes to countering some of these stigmas, if you're not actually showing that, then you're just throwing it out there just to put it, for me it feels like you're just kind of putting it in someone's face. If you can show that as a character development or a plot progression kind of thing, perhaps that would be a healthier method to do it. Don't just throw something out there saying, hey, isn't this crazy, and then leave it at that. That's not going to help anyone.
I see head nods. Jess?
Oh, um, I think this goes a lot with having to do a session zero and establishing what the game is going to be about. Um, I ran a game of Bluebeard's Bride that was specifically back when I was in grad school, that was specifically for a class on intimate partner violence. So going in, and I kind of had to teach people what a tabletop RPG was, but I was running the game and I'm a survivor myself. And so I think most of the people in the class were. And I was like, we're going to be exploring this, but it's a safe space. And that, like, I know that that game can go wrong so many ways, but going through it in kind of an academic way to explore things that we had all kind of been through, and knowing that we were safe, we had pretty much every safety tool under the book available. And then we did a discussion afterwards to talk about it. And we talked about how we had gotten to face like a fantastical version of some things that we had been through in real life, and how it was kind of cathartic to be able to get past them in a way that we hadn't been able to in the real life.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Chantal?
I think some of that definitely session zero. I agree with everything that's been said already. Definitely a session zero, but it's also, I think, about making sure that the entire group is on the same track. And by that, I mean also the GM, DM, storyteller. Like we often forget that they are a person too. They're sort of helping us through this story, but they also have to consent to the story that they're presenting being used as a form of healing. Um, because I mean, I trained for 6 years before I was allowed to work with people in the capacity that I do. And even then, there are times when I'm sitting there facing a client going, "Oh, this is a lot. Okay, let's work through this together because we kind of need to at this point." Um, Even with the consent of that relationship and that engagement with a client, that is still something to navigate. Um, and I think in terms of healing, when we use things that can be or have been traumatic, we kind of need to balance that up so that we are not vicariously traumatizing someone else at the same time. Um, and so it comes back for me to that communication back and forth. Um, like having a conversation in character, then stepping out of it and going, how was that for everyone? Do we need to take a break? Is there something that we need to discuss out of character? Do you want to discuss something out of character, or do you want to leave it for now and we'll just stop that scene? We'll stop playing for a little bit and we'll play a different game together or something. Or we'll get a cup of tea, or just anything that takes us away from that for a little bit. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that Chantal, that absolutely stole the words from my mouth. Fantastic. I think words. Um, I think as players, we like to hand our GMs knives sometimes. Um, and sometimes they're fun knives, and sometimes they're more real knives. And sometimes you don't realize until halfway through the campaign, oh, that's a real knife that I was subconsciously dealing with. Oh, I'm dealing with a thing with this character. Interesting. And I think the more transparency and open communication you can have with your GM and your group about that, the better it can be sort of a healing experience rather than sort of like re-traumatizing yourself. So it's important to, like, for me at least as a role player, to be taking inventory of, is that a real thing? Was that a Quinn thought, or was that an Astrid thought? Whose thought was that? Interesting that. But I had a really brilliant experience where, like, I handed a GM a very large knife and I said, this is a real life knife, but I'm down to handle it if you are. And instead of having it be this big confrontational thing, it turned into a very cathartic moment because that GM then, because they had all of the information about what I was dealing with and the table knew what was going on, we had this really great one-on-one moment where my character was able to sort of get the closure from a traumatic experience that they needed to move forward and close that arc. And now they have this big, exciting new story that suddenly opened up that was not an option because they were so stuck. And by extension, I was that stuck and I didn't realize it. So it was a really great experience for me. Shout out to Andrew Steven, uh, my DM for that, for On Where Roots Remain. And it can be a really, really, really healing thing, but you have to have open communication or it won't work.
I'm looking at the time. I'm aware of our time. We are running towards the end of the time for the panel, but we do have one more question from the chat that I want to make sure that we get to, because I think it's a really, really important one, just like all the things we've been discussing. And this somewhat echoes something that we talked a little bit about before. Specifically, Kestrel Ray asks, how would you handle a player wanting to use a character to portray a mental illness or neurodivergence that the player themselves does not have. Quinn, I see you ready to go.
I'm so sorry. I'm so expressive and I just jump in. I don't really have anything to say other than ask them why they want to do that. I think the why is the most important part of that.
Yeah, tagging off of that, I think sometimes I've had players want to do that, and it's because like they've just found out that a lot of fun is struggling with something and they want to kind of explore it. If it's because they think it's funny, that's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, the why is really critical, I think. Scriv, maybe I thought I saw your hand up and you didn't. I'm sorry if I'm calling you out unnecessarily.
I was grabbing my water bottle.
Oh,
But
see, I'm not
I
wearing my
absolutely agree
glasses
with,
right
with
now,
things that have
so
been said. It's all good. No, I absolutely agree with things that have already been said. I couldn't say it any better.
well, we do still have time if there's another question that chat wants to ask that we haven't addressed yet. I really want to make sure that you have an opportunity to go ahead and put it in the chat. Um, we we've talked a lot about so many different things that are really important and so helpful, I think, to the storytellers and the players. And I will ask one question because I know it reflected me at the beginning of my role gaming career. And that was, how would you recommend, whether it's as a player, as a DM, how would you recommend to reduce anxiety amongst gamers? And what are some grounding skills or tension reducers that can be used at the table? Anxiety was huge for me when I started. I am naturally so introverted and I was terrified and I felt on all the time in a bad way that inhibited me. So I know I'm not alone in that. Any advice?
I suppose it depends on what's causing the anxiety. Is it the fact that you're with a new group of people that you don't know? Is it the fact that you're exploring a character that you haven't met yet or before? The anxiety comes from so many different places and from so many different things, that it's difficult to give advice about that on a more general theme. I suppose trust, or seeing where those avenues of trust are, and if it's a new group of players or a new group of people, um, seeing seeing whether you can trust and what you can trust, and trusting your instincts, because often those that little gut instinct is probably right. Sometimes it's wrong and sometimes it can get distorted, but often if you feel a certain way about something or someone, obeying that in the first instance is probably going to help you the best, rather than pushing yourself further into an anxiety that you don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. Scriv.
Trust, I agree with you, Chantel, is absolutely the key word. And it's easier in some situations than others. So if you're doing like a pickup game at a con or something, that one might be a little bit trickier. But because I dealt with some of this, not just for myself, because we all have anxieties, right? I am no exception by any means. A lot of mine came from a lack of confidence in myself, a lack of trust in people around me. Um, for a long time, I had a hard time trusting other people, especially when it comes to making yourself vulnerable in that kind of way. So if you have the opportunity to, I know we've touched upon session zeros kind of thing before. I always enjoy session zero, but don't be afraid to even just have an initial meetup or something. Or if you're doing a session zero, have it relaxed. Try to get to know each other a little bit, even outside of the context of the game, before you go into that gameplay. Again, if you have the opportunity to. A lot of groups don't always have that luxury, especially when we are currently in lockdown. But even doing a Skype hang up or a meetup like this, I think the ironic thing about this pandemic situation we find ourselves in is that it's actually bringing a lot of people even closer together. And you see new relationships growing alongside the old ones. That I find that personally beautiful in a lot of ways. But if you can try to lower some of those walls before gameplay even begins, it goes a long way in helping other people feel comfortable. And if you are looking at this as part of the healing tool, I see a lot of our questions kind of blurring together with this one piece. Um, don't feel like you have to force it. Have that communication, have that trust, and a lot of those things that you are trying to work through. And as a GM, keep an eye out for this. Ideally, they will develop naturally if you have that initial familiarization with the people at the table with you.
Great. Well, speaking of session 0, actually, we have a question from the chat from Rogue Dice Roll. GMs often set the agenda for a session 0. Let's say we're playing in a game, not the GM. How would you suggest bringing anything surrounding mental health up with the GM and other players? I know that can be difficult sometimes to broach that conversation. So, any thoughts? I know that there are some really good safety tools that make it easier with a checklist, for example. Um, Anybody have, excuse me, advice for just ways to have that conversation?
I think that it can be very nerve wracking to try to talk about those things in an open group. In a lot of the session zeros I've tried to take some time with each player individually, or that's coming from the jam perspective as well. But I've had this experience as a player too. A lot of people won't feel comfortable talking about it in front of the larger group right away. So if you can have that kind of conversation to the side, one on one, however you feel most comfortable doing it, as a player to the GM, to say, hey, kind of thinking this, kind of feeling this, currently going through A, B, C. Try to introduce that and then work with the GM to see if there are kind of smooth ways to introduce that. But it's all about your comfort level, I think.
And going back to that gut instinct, if you feel as though your GM isn't going to be responsive to something like that, even gently raised, it might be worth considering that this might not be the right group for you. And that's also fine.
Yeah. Especially now, there are more groups than ever playing online. I know back in the old days, if you didn't have people in person to play with, you were kind of out of luck. But now there's so many folks that will be safe to play with. It's just a matter of finding each other.
Yeah,
Quinn?
and if I tack on to what Chantel said, if you don't feel comfortable bringing it up with your GM, or your GM doesn't bring it up first, I think that's something to consider pretty heavily, because my mentality as a GM is like, my player's mental health comes first, and I want to address that immediately before I even get to try to telling whatever my story or our story is, if that makes sense. It's like if there's not even a lines and veils conversation from a GM initially before session 0 or at session 0, I'm not playing in that group. I'm a little bit harsher. Like,
Yeah, and I think if like, not every game has to be for every person, not every GM has to be for you. So even if it isn't like a mental health thing, well, I was about to say it could be a phobia, but that's also a mental health thing. But let's say like you're terrified of snakes, that's a common one, and you just don't want snakes in the game, and you tell the GM, generally they're like, that's fine, I won't have snakes attack you. However, if the game is snakes, the game of snakes in your face, they might respond with, maybe this isn't the best game for us to play together, but I would love to have you in this other game called Slappy Fish or something, that doesn't have snakes in your face. So it's something that you can ideally work out.
We have another question from the chat that asks from Reese Fellas. Again, pronunciation today is not my friend, so I apologize if I get that wrong. What about bleed of emotions? Like someone ends up running into a trigger for you without realizing it. I've felt shoved out of groups because of my trauma responses. So, yeah. Quinn, you want to?
I'm so sorry. I keep being the first person to express emotions and want to say things. Um, I feel that super hard. Bleed is a super real thing that I wish got talked about more. Um, and being an actor and having acting training, people assume that you know how to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with our own effing emotions, but actors are the worst. I think again it comes down to open communication with your group and developing. I really like what I think Jess you said about having a buddy in your group. I've never had that. Now I'm like I should probably think about doing that next time. I have had a lot of trauma responses come up in games before stream games, which is always super stressful. Um, where I'm like, I didn't anticipate this being a thing at all. And just having open communication and those safety tools in place where you can just like in Zoom chat, just be like, I'm not good right now. Like I'm calling a yellow or I just like, I personally need a minute. And if your group is responsive to that, I mean, if your group isn't responsive to that, like fuck them, but they will be responsive to that if they're the group for you. Um, we also just, sorry, quick side note to safety tools. We added in, for one game I was in, we added in something called the white card because we had a lot of, tackled some heavier stuff. And a couple of us found, we were like, oh, we keep dissociating. Oops. So the white card became a, hey, I'm good, but I just like need a minute to become a person again. So something like that can be good as well. Bleed's hard. Be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to. There's a few GMs who are actually pretty good friends of mine that I just won't play with because I've been re-triggered from some of my own trauma in so much of their games, and they're wonderful people, but I can't do that. And I think it's good to like know that about yourself. Like sometimes people can be a really great friend, but maybe not a good GM. Somebody can be a really good friend and maybe not a good player. And it sucks because you know you love your friends and you want to do everything with them. And sometimes you can't do that. And like Quinn said, bleed is hard and a lot comes up in gaming. And if your group isn't being accepting of your needs when you're triggered or when trauma presents itself, because sometimes it can be hard, especially on a streamed game, to say like I'm not okay with this because there's an audience there. Right. And you want to like muscle through it and deal with it later. If you just put like on Twitter, I'm looking for a game, tag me in it, I will retweet. I'm not like famous, but I have enough people that follow me. We'll find you a group of cool people. Like, yeah.
And I'll second that. Yeah. Um, Jess is awesome and will signal boost and find you a resource. I know that. I have no doubt. I'd say we've already gone over, but that's okay because this is a really good conversation. I'd like to add another question just to maybe shift the content a little bit and say, can you speak to the benefits of community and collaboration in the wake of social distancing? You know, we've talked about online games a lot, and now because of social distancing, maybe this is new for people who are used to playing in person, or there are new opportunities to discover role gaming for the first time. Um, what are the benefits of this kind of community and collaboration that you see? I see people thinking about it. Do I answer? Do I answer?
No one wants to be the first.
I know everybody's so
I'll jump
polite.
I'll jump in as
Yeah.
the probably least polite person here. This is great. Um, I'm a Brit that's not polite. This is wonderful.
Oh
Um,
my.
so new. Um, the this world that we live in at the moment, where we're all physically apart, but we're all seemingly closer together and engaging much more closely on everything that we're interested in as much as we can. Um, there's so much out there and so many different ways to communicate with each other and so many different ways that we can collaborate with each other. One of the things that I know that I personally have been doing is I started world building on Twitter. So I just put up, okay, let's build a world. What's caused this world to exist? And then I give 4 options, and then people choose, and then we come back and we just keep cycling through. So now we've got the beginnings of a world that I'm going to go away and start writing, and then I'll bring it back and be like, okay, so this is what we have so far. What do we need inside of this? And so that collaborative storytelling can happen on so many different social media methods, that I feel as though this kind of collaboration should grow. I can't see it. I can't see it shrinking, and I can't see it dropping away when everyone is physically dancing in the streets again, because we're all dancing on Zoom as well. Like, dance parties across the world simultaneously are great, and I think we should keep doing them.
Great.
Yeah, I think part of this is I can speak English. Um, a lot of my gamer friends are computer literate because we stream a lot and we all have Zoom, but my non-gamer friends did not. And now I'm reconnecting with a lot of them who have moved elsewhere because, as millennials, we've all shifted and live all over the world. And now I have brunch in my house with my friends who live in New York, kind of thing. And we're like, oh, we actually could do this all the time. We don't have to only talk to each other every 6 months. We could do this regularly.
Other thoughts?
I think just the term community and how we see it is being redefined for all of those things that you've already mentioned. We're facing a period in history that is, because I do think of this as kind of a historic thing in a lot of ways, that's changing us at the individual level, at the community level, at the societal level. Like I said before, new connections are being strengthened alongside old ones, because even though we have to maintain that physical distance, we still are community driven beings. So we crave that kind of connection. So you're finding new ways to do it. I love the dance parties all around the world. All the videos of people, singing together from their balconies. There's this one song. It's quick nerd tangent. For World War II era Bella Ciao song that was about people coming together and rising up against injustice. Google it. It's a beautiful song, a very, very interesting history. It's become an anthem in a lot of ways to a lot of different cultures, particularly in Europe. And that has had a resurgence during this pandemic. There are people in Italy who are singing this together from their balconies as a way to find strength. There are people in Germany singing it and recording themselves singing it in solidarity with people in Italy. It's incredible. And you're seeing very similar kinds of themes in the gaming community. How many different places do we live just on this panel and in the chat? And here we are sitting together talking about something that is very real for everyone that you're going to meet in your life, partially because all these other cons were canceled. So I think you're going to see a lot more events like this popping up, a lot more people feeling empowered and comfortable with reaching out and finding those communities. I think it's yeah, I think there's a lot of redefinition, and even though it's a challenging time, I'm hoping, because I'm a chronic optimist. Is that in the can that be diagnosed? Um I think that there are some positivities to be found in this as well.
I'm glancing into chat, and yeah, Jazz, at least 3 countries represented on the panel. Good point. So, and who knows how many folks in the audience are coming to us from other parts of the world. So it's makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. It really does. I can't travel. I love to travel, and I get to travel this way and meet all of you. So many of you, this is the first time I'm seeing your face, and I'm so happy I'm finally doing that. Any other thoughts on community and collaboration in this era of social distancing? I will say that from an accessibility standpoint, it's something I appreciate because a lot of folks aren't necessarily able to go to cons physically for other reasons. And so now we're seeing this proliferation of disability friendly technology. So that means a lot to me as well, and a lot of folks I know. So I think we're going to try to wrap it up, but I know for as much as we've talked about, there's a lot that we haven't. So I'm going to ask each panelist if there's one thing that we haven't talked about or that you want to reiterate to share with the audience. What would that be? What would that be? And you can go in any order that you want. I'm not in my old professor mode. I'm not going to call on the audience necessarily and put you on the spot. Yeah, Quinn.
I'll go. I guess this kind of ties back into like the anxiety for new gamers and also finding new groups, etc. If a GM or a large group of players, not even large, if a group of players or a GM doesn't respect your lines, your veils, your needs as a human, that's not your table. Find another one, find a better one. Don't put yourself through that, even though you might feel pressured to for whatever reason, even if they're normally your friends. Like Jess said, sometimes you can have a great friend who just you can't be at their tables, and that's okay. So taking care of yourself first. That also helps with bleed. That means you have the support you need to go places maybe you wouldn't normally have been able to go in a TTRPG.
Thank you. Anyone else? Final thought you want to share?
I'll go.
Yeah.
Communication. Communicate constantly, consistently, at the depth that you are comfortable with in a very, respectful manner with everyone. That's it.
Excellent. Yeah, Jess.
I'm going to say try and tune into your body, because a lot of times emotions can be so nebulous and squicky, we might not have a word for what we're feeling. But if you're at a table and all of a sudden your stomach hurts and your shoulders are really tight and you can't feel your hands, you're tense for a reason, and check in and see if it's because something in the gameplay is making you anxious because it's so exciting, or because something's wrong. Because whether or not you're actually actively dealing with your emotions, your body's going to deal with your emotions. So tune into them and get used to those feels and learn how your body processes emotion so that you can be aware of it and attune.
Mhm. Excellent. Anything else? Well, as a reminder for the audience, and I thank you so much,
I
audience,
think
for
Scriv had
being
a
with
thing.
us.
I,
Pardon?
I don't.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
It's okay.
Oh no, Ed,
Oh.
please.
um, just piggybacking again because that's what we enjoy doing. Um, yeah, having that ability to self-reflect is very important, and I think now is a fantastic time to do that. You have all of the time and space that you need. You can reach out to the people that you need to reach out to, and I highly encourage you to. The things that you're trying to work through, the things that you're experiencing will most likely come through your character and your actions naturally if you're going to bring this to a role-playing game. Don't be married to a single system either. If you're really into Dungeons and Dragons, but it's not really doing it for you, whether it's the group or the system or something, or you feel like you just have to homebrew everything, as much as I love 5th edition, you still have to homebrew a lot to get some of the things
Yeah.
that we've been talking about. find a different system, create something yourself, find something that works for you. And as the natural development of your character unveils some of these things, be open to those moments when they come. Embrace them, use the safety of your character to really explore them. I strongly believe that we put a bit of our own essence into each character we create. So that strong and brave character you've created came from somewhere within you. And don't ever forget that. That exists within you. So use that storytelling to really nurture and tap into that.
I'm going to give you a big heart for that because I really feel that, so. Um, Noah, did you want to give us any parting thoughts before we wrap?
I was specifically trying to avoid being the parting thoughts guy. Yeah, well,
Uh,
the difference between I'm trying to think of one good nugget to take away from my perspective as a therapist. The difference a lot of times in a gaming group, it's always going to help people to be assertive about their needs and their
yeah.
agendas, right? A gaming group should not be necessarily a group therapy session, but it could be if everybody's lucky, right? Um, so I guess maybe a thing to be conscious of is be assertive, right, and understand the difference between assertiveness and aggression, right? I think that's a thing that in the West we're confusing a lot of the time. My getting my needs met is important, but we want also everybody else's needs to get met in our group. And if those needs are incompatible, then try assertively to work those things out. And if it can't be done, then yeah, don't be aggressive about getting your needs met because that's when these things go wrong. That's my that's my that's my parting shot. Peace. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much. And thank you, audience, for being here. You've been wonderful. And thank you for the questions. And as a reminder, why are we doing CouchCon? Well, a lot of the reasons that we talked about here, but also because, well, we love you. And if we couldn't see you in person, we wanted to see you this way. And we're also raising money to support Doctors Without Borders. So again,
Woo!
it's down below. Look for the link, look for the info there. Please, if you're able to do so, donate. Show them some love. If you're not able to do so, please signal boost and share. And even outside of this and outside of CouchCon, look for ways to support the healthcare professionals and others that are keeping us going through this time as we are socially isolating and self quarantining and keeping each other safe. I want to say thank you again to all of the panelists. You've been wonderful. I've learned a lot. I love and appreciate all of you so much. And it's great the people that I haven't seen face to face before. Now I can say I've done that. So I'll invite you to let the audience know more about, again, who you are and where they can find you so they can follow you in your work. Let's start with Jess.
Hey, I'm Jess. You can find me on Twitter at miss_Jess03 or on Twitch at Angry Nerd Girl. I write games and supplements, and I produce Book of Seasons, Equinoxes, and Solstices. It's right behind me. That's why I'm pointing at it. You can come check me out when I stream games on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 and 8 p.m. respectively. It's pretty fun. We have a good time. Lynn plays. And yeah, that's all. Thank you for coming. I loved doing this and support Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah. Scriv.
Okay. Hello. I am Scrib the Bard, writer and GM and all the other stuff I said before. You can find me at scribthebard.com. I write a lot of articles there, and I've got some cool stuff in the library if you're interested. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I typically stream Tuesdays for our chill creation stream and Thursdays for our gaming stream. And actually, since we've been in lockdown, I've started introducing story time. So I've been reading like stories, fairy tales, and folklore aloud and trying to clip that as a separate little video because I know a lot of we call ourselves the scribblers. I know a lot of you scribblers out there have little ones at home. So that's been something that we've been having fun with. But yeah, you can find me there. Discord, we've got our Heroes of Eastera Discord. That's the homebrew setting that we we play around in, we explore. I have a couple of collaborations on DM's Guild. I didn't even think about it until your little push there, Jess. That was awesome. But I'm in Uncaged Volume 3 and 12 Days of Midwinter. And I guess to end, huge thanks to Jess and Lynn and Nova for helping facilitate this, and huge thanks to the other panelists and the chat. You guys have some amazing questions, wonderful thoughts in your brains there. But yeah, Doctors Without Borders, support and support each other. That's all I've got.
Quinn?
Hello, I'm Quinn. You can find me on Twitter at Quintastic_. That's with 3 N's because I'm like that. You can find my games on itch.io at quintastic.itch.io. All of the information should be on my Twitter. It's my hub. It's where I live. My streaming schedule had a couple of seasons just end. Things are kind of nebulous. There's a pandemic. I don't know if you've noticed. So it's a little up in the air right now, but Twitter is the place to keep an eye on that. I have probably my first DM's Guild release coming out soon, TM, and also something for Cypher coming out, TM. Coming soon, TM. Yep, that's me. I write things and play games. I sure do. I'm gonna stop talking now. Thank you all so much for being here. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Jess and Lynn, for organizing this. And Nova, see you in the shadows, and everyone in chat. And it's been super great, y'all.
Thanks, Quinn. Noah?
Oh yeah, well, thanks everyone. It's been a pleasure to play here with you this evening. It's wonderful to be surrounded by heroes, and it's wonderful to support heroes. Support your heroes, Doctors Without Borders, going into the dungeons of the world and bringing out the treasure. Right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Find me if you can. Right. That's all I'm gonna. There you
go. And Chantel?
Hey, I don't know how to follow that. That's fantastic. Doctors Without Borders, absolutely. Support where you can, support how you can. I am Chantel B. You can find me on Twitter at Chantel B. You can also find me on my website, which is live now, which is Words with Color, but I'm an Australian Brit, so that's color with a U. I am a writer, actor, streamer, psychologist. Yeah, a lot of things. Do a lot of things with my time. I stream quite frequently on a channel called Do Respite, where we basically use games as it's literally a storytelling device. So we hope that everyone that comes and enjoys the games are enjoying the game for the storytelling, not so much for the sort of learning opportunity that gaming can provide. That's about it for me. You can find me tomorrow on Do Respite for a talk show that happens weekly, which is called Storyteller Studio, where we sort of take something from our lives and then talk about it in the context of TTRPGs and questions that we have, and we discuss those things. So again, Doctors Without Borders, and thank you to everyone. Everyone here, all of you have been amazing and wonderful and very enjoyable to spend time with.
And I have to say again how much I love you all, and I love you, chat. Who am I? Why am I doing this? Well, because it means a lot to me personally on a lot of levels. My name is Lynn, and you can find me on Twitter at lit_m_Meyer, because apparently both my first and last name are really, really common. So I had to use my middle initial. Go figure. I post most of my updates on Twitter. But if you want to follow some of my work, you can find my work in Uncaged Volume 1, Friends, Foes, and Other Fine Folks, just a bunch of different things, Book of Seasons. So find me on DM's Guild, find me on Twitter. And Tuesday, you can find me hanging out with Jess. I get to play a very good dog in the Pugmire stream. It's really fun being a dog cleric. I enjoy it more than I thought I would, because I'm a cat person historically, but I'm playing a very good dog. And starting in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to see me on Wednesday nights in a new Wildmount-based campaign that's coming up. So that will be coming with more details soon. Um, we are, just as a note, rating Chromatic Chimera. Now, as we close out this panel, they are doing a Lancer live play. So give some love to our friends at Chromatic Chimera and give some love to all of our panelists. Thank you so much again. Stay safe, stay well, love each other, support Doctors Without Borders. Mwah. Thanks, friends. All those lovely faces. Oh, I have so much.